Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Poetry Thursday, where I am slowly, poet by poet, making my way through this book, 20th Century American Poetry, edited by Diana Gioia, David Mason, and Meg Shorkey. And we are up to a poet today called Charles Olson, who only lived for 60 years and is most famous for a poetic sequence. Always a deadly thing. It's always a deadly thing, uh, whether it's James Merrill or Ezra Pound or anybody. A poetic sequence means that the poet is tinkering. He's puttering around. He's fussing with something that he's probably going to fuss with for his whole life, which means it's going to be bad because it's going to lack concentration, which is one of the elements of any artistic creation. You don't show up every other Wednesday to add a little brick or two to the bridge you're building. Concentration is necessary, and if you don't have it, then you're wandering around. And anybody, even someone who doesn't put any time into creative endeavors, can wander around. Charles Olson had a poetic sequence called the Maximus poems. He wrote them for his whole life, always flaccidly, always self-indulgently. So I don't know. I'm in a Maximus kind of mind, so I'll do that for an hour this afternoon, or I'll do that for 3 manic days this weekend. But I won't ever finish it, nor will I would argue, intend to finish it. Which means that what you're going to get is just garbage. But he is revered. And the Maximus poems volume, he never actually did finish. So you can go and find alternate texts. It's the Dude Bros playground. He is the kind of poet that Dude Bros tend to like when they find him, although Dude Bros don't do any literary research. So since he's not alive and since he's not being hyped by other Dude Bros, they don't know about him. But naturally in this book, there's barely anything. There are 2 poems that the editors include from him. One is an excerpt, a Maximus poem. The other is not. But I figured to do him justice, since this is what he spent most of his creative time on, we would read the Maximus poem here, which is called Maximus to Himself. I have had to learn the simplest things last, which made for difficulties. Even at sea I was slow to get the hand out or to cross a wet deck. The sea was not finally my trade, but even my trade, at it I stood estranged from that which was most familiar, was delayed, and not content with the man's argument that such postponement is now the nature of obedience. And I'm going to show you, that is the verse. All right, lines. It's not actually a verse of any kind, but the lines that we just read. But when we move to the next stanza, it's suddenly this. There is no explanation given for this. There is no metrical change in the words that are being used or their cadence. It just looks different. That's all. And if you ask Charles Olson, he would say, no, it has to be this way. So we would continue on. And you can see it varies between those 2 sizes of blocks of text all throughout. That we are all late in a slow time, that we grow up many in a single, is not easily known. It could be, though, the sharpness, the acuite, I note in others, makes more sense than my own distances. The agilities they show daily, who do the world's business, and who do nature's, as I have no sense I have done either. I have made dialogues, have discussed ancient texts, have thrown what light I could, offered what pleasures Dosiad allows. But the known, this I have had to be given, a life, love, and from one man the world. Tokens, but sitting here, I look out as a wind and water man, testing and missing some proof. I know the quarters of the weather, where it comes from, where it goes, but the stem of me that I took from their welcome or their rejection of me, and my arrogance was neither diminished nor increased by the communication. It is undone business I speak of this morning, with the sea stretching out from my feet. If we're being generous to that thing that I just read, we can say, if we're being generous and also extremely general, we can say, well, it's about a man who feels unmoored. He has obviously spent some time at sea. He has maybe, judging by the cod Latin, he has done some teaching. but he isn't sure of the things in the world and is writing about that in blocks of prose of varying widths. But nothing more than that. There's no context to this at all. So we don't know enough about that man. He sounds disillusioned, but we don't know. We don't know that. We don't know enough about him to care at all about these thoughts. This insistent first person pronoun. We don't know enough about the narrator to care at all, and we don't know about anything else. There's no context given for the poem. So it just sits there, and you will, if you love the Maximus poems and you've read through them and you have a feeling that you know what the poet's doing, maybe you've heard him talk or read about the Maximus poems, well, then you'll nod because you think this is one more brick in the wall. But if you don't know that, and this is not ripped out of context. This is a standalone poem. If you don't know any of that stuff that you'd get from the other 10,000 pages of Maximus poems, then you won't, I don't think, get anything out of this poem. Which is, as I mentioned, a problem that this book runs into, and by extension, the genre of 20th century American poetry runs into that problem, where suddenly the poems that you are reading stop making any sense at all. They've long since stopped making any metrical sense. They have no meter. But they now stop making any sense just word to word. That you have no idea what is being discussed or why. And since you don't even have metrics to fall back on, that leaves you precisely nothing, except the in-crowd feeling of knowing the in-jokes of the author, if you study them. So in 20th century American poetry, leading up to the apocalyptic poem in mind, but also the whole of it, is the 1960s and 70s obsessive studying of liner notes on albums. Imagine that obsessive study of liner notes and what they mean, which I don't think you get anymore in 21st century music, but once upon a time, your album came with liner notes, and they were sometimes obscure, they were often densely packed prose, and hyper fans of the album would study the liner notes, like Kabbalistic prose. Now imagine, and that was in response to loving the music and going to the concerts. And what happens in 20th century American poetry is that the liner note, insider knowledge studying of text starts to happen free of anything else. Imagine if there were liner notes in the 1960s and 70s, but none of the album. So you didn't have the music. You had no artistic competence at all. You just had the liner notes. That's what this starts to become. I don't know this for sure, but I can almost guarantee that the more you know about Charles Olson, the more you will know about that poem. But anyway, that is Charles Olson. That's a good enough example. If you somehow liked that, well, the Maximus poems give you 1,000 pages of that. But this does raise a problem. It does raise a problem with Poetry Thursday, because I am dedicated to going through this book at least until we get to the beast slouching towards Bethlehem to be born. At least until we get to what I consider to be ground zero for the death of poetry as a popular genre. And I noticed today when I was opening this book, I noticed that we have 2 Thursdays left at the most that we're talking in 2025. So we're not going to reach it. We're not going to reach that poem in 2025. So I kind of wonder, should I read it now and dispense with this volume? Or should I carry over this volume to 2025, even though I imagine all of you are sick of it by now? I don't know. Should I read a representative sampling of the poems in between and then read that poem for our last Poetry Thursday together in 2025? I'm not sure. I don't know which to do. Which do you prefer? Anyway, I'll figure it out. I'll listen to you, of course, and we'll see what happens next Thursday. Maybe more than one poetry day in a week might get us there at least. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now. That was Charles Olson, and I will see you soon. Thank you, Booktube.